Hello, welcome. I'm Pauline from PQW and welcome to my YouTube channel. I want to talk to you about our Dance of the Butterfly pattern, which is a fabulous quilt as you go technique, putting this quilt together. So I'm just going to take you through and show you some of the pointers if you had this pattern. And be aware this can be made any size. I've only made it as a small quilt, as you can see from the quilt behind me here. But there's no reason why you can't add more panels once you learn how to do this. There's no reason why you can't make the panels wider than what these are and add more of your fans and your butterflies. There's no reason why you can't make it longer. So once you learn the basic technique to this quilt, it is fabulous to make into a queen size quilt. You just need extra fabric and repeat what you do in this size project. So we're going to take you through, I'm going to just quickly talk about the quilting, how I've quilted it. It is in two different panels. There's this panel here. I quilted it first, then I'd done the applique over the top, and then I've made this panel, quilted it, done the applique on it, and then we've joined it together with a triple sashing. So I'll just show you some of the brief things that you need to know about if you were going to make this quilt. I have written the pattern, so it's got lots of instructions in here for you. So we put lots of coloured photos in here so you can see exactly what I'm doing step by step. I talk about the right tools to use. I've got all the quilting lines marked out for you. We show you every step of the way. You get all of the patterns for your butterflies. When I've come to the flowers on the quilt, up here, I've fussy cut around the flowers from a beautiful fabric that I used. But if you don't have a fabric that has, flowers on that you can fussy cut out, in the pattern, I have given you a lot of options with different flowers. So here we have different flowers that you could cut out yourself out of your own fabric and applique them on. We have all the different blades for the fans in there. So let's just show you a few of the things that will make making this quilt very easy for you. So to start with, I've cut my cream fabric out and the backing and the wadding. Now the wadding or the batting that I use is the Hobbs Heirloom double-sided fusible batting. Now in all of my videos and everything I teach, wherever I teach, I always recommend this batting because I believe it is the best one for any Quilt As You Go projects because it doesn't leave any bulk where we join the panels together. So here I've got the first panel started. So what I've done first up is ironed the 3 layers together and then I've marked out the quilting lines. Now, just straight line quilting can be fabulous and I've done a little bit of fill in with stippling. But if I'm going to mark all of these lines, particularly on a cream coloured fabric, I'm going to use a little ruler. I love my 1 inch by 10 inch ruler. Now, I don't want to mark it with a marking pencil because I would have to wash it to get all the marks out. So I use the Hera marker. So this is the tool that puts a crease in the fabric. So if I'm going to draw these lines on, use the Hera marker, run it across the fabric a couple of times, and hopefully you can see that, but it puts a crease in my fabric. And then I stitch on that line. So that's exactly how I've marked this out. Now these green sections that I've put on here, they're just a feature on the quilt. This was one big panel of fabric. These are just features. Now to make that, I've used the 1 inch sasher tool. I've cut the fabric 2 inches wide. I fold it in and in till it meets, and we just press it to start with. We put it into the tool. And the sasher tools have been used to make the triple sashing for the quilt. So they're very, very easy to use. You would pin this into your ironing surface, and I'm just ironing over the top of the quilt. It won't hurt it. And all we do is push. So that's how I've made those green feature strips. And I just felt it filled in a little bit of the background into the quilt. It just added another little element of making it all flow and work together. So once I've got those made, I just put a little dab of the Roxanne glue down on the back of this and I position it wherever I want. Very, very simple. Then I've stitched it on both sides really close to the edge, and I've used the mono poly clear thread in the top and the bobbin of my machine. So when I stitch these on, it becomes part of my quilting pattern. We'll just flip this little piece over and you can see where I've stitched. Hopefully the camera can pick that up. You can see where I've stitched those little strips on in place. It just becomes part of my quilting design. So once we've got all that done, we're ready to start using our pattern to trace off our blades. Now, as I said, the patterns for all of that are in your pattern sheet. I'll just find them again. Now we've got, I'll tell you how many to cut, and you do have to reverse it, because I've got some of the blades on some of the fans going one way and some of the blades going the other way. You can either cut this paper pattern up, but if you cut it up, you're going to lose what's on the back. So the way I use this pattern is I use the mesh transfer mat. Now hopefully you can see this. This is a tool that I've been using for years and years and years, and I believe it's one of the best things you can have when you want to transfer a design from your pattern to your fabric. So it's got little holes in it. There's no right or wrong side to it. You simply put it down over your pattern and you use a very, very blunt 2B lead pencil and trace the design onto the mat. Once you've got that done, you're then going to start cutting out your fabric. So to do that, I'm going to use my little workboard, because I like to use the sandpaper part of the board to put my fabric down on so it doesn't stretch when I trace the design onto fabric. Now, talking about fabrics, I find using the little colour balance tool is fantastic, because I want to be able to get a good balance of light, medium and dark colours in any of my quilts that I make. I like to have that balance. So here's the selection of fabrics that I've used for this little quilt. Now, if I put this little tool over the top here, I can see what is going to be my lightest and my darkest fabric. Even though to the eye they all look like they're quite dark, but they're not really. This one, top one, is going to come out as my light fabric, my black is going to be my darkest, and this little feature print is my medium. So I use this tool a lot to help me work out my fabrics. Now, to trace our designs off, now you have to be aware, if you're going to cut the blades out for one of the fans, they all need to be going the same way. So if I folded my fabric, I'm going to get a mirror image. They're going to go opposite ways, which means you have to have your fabric out singly to trace your design. You can't double cut. You've got to have it singly. So pop your mat on top. I use the Bohin fabric marking pencil because I know this doesn't damage my fabric in any way or form. I use the little ruler so I can get a nice straight line. And I've found having this little ruler, it is so handy for so many things. Trace the design. And you'll hear when I run this pencil over the top of this mat, you can hear that little noise. It's got little tiny holes in it, so the pencil's going through the little tiny holes, and when I take the mat off, I'll have my design drawn onto the fabric. So I've used this to cut out all the butterflies, any of the flowers I need. When we've finished using this mat and we don't need that design anymore, you just use a normal paper eraser and you erase the design off. You can wash the mat. You can scrub it, you can wrinkle it all up and scrub it, you can iron it with a hot iron, it won't melt. So I just think it's a fabulous tool for any application we need to trace a design from the pattern to the fabric. So here's our shape here. Now we're going to cut that out. So I come over to my cutting mat in my workboard. I'm going to use the little ruler again, put it down, and I use the tiny little 18mm blade. rotary cutter, and I cut on those lines. So then I go around and cut out all of the blades that I want for this quilt, you know, just choosing the fabrics that we like. And it makes it so easy. Oops, I didn't cut right into the corner. So there's one of my blades made. So once you've got all of those pieces cut out, we come back to our quilted piece. And as you'll realise, doing it in small sections like this, it's very easy to quilt. It's very easy to get a piece this size under your machine and be able to manage it. You haven't got the big bulk of the quilt. So decide, you know, you can follow the pattern exactly of positioning for all of your pieces, or you can just randomly put them wherever you would like. So just put them down, overlapping them a little bit. Put as many blades on there as you want. That is really your choice. And we'll put this one here. So there's my design out. I'm happy with that. And when we're going to be adding the flowers to it, we're going to fussy cut them. So if we were going to fussy cut a flower for there, this is the fabric I've used, and it's quite old. I've had it for quite some time. So I've just used really nice sharp scissors. So I recommend the jack scissors because they've got a really sharp point and they've got a lovely big hole here for your fingers to fit in so your fingers don't get tired of cutting. I've cut all the way around, very close to the edge. Cut around some of the flowers if you want to add a little bit of a feature. Just take your time. It's great to sit down and relax doing this sort of thing. And here's the flower that I have cut out. So now I could position this wherever I want. So I look at all that and I place everything out to get it happy. And I like to use a design wall. I have a lovely design wall where I'd pin this up, piece up onto, and then I'd start working with all of my pieces. Once I'm happy with the positioning, I'm now going to glue these in place by using the Roxanne glue basted. I'm not going to leave the flower on there at the moment or glue it on. I'm just going to run a little row of glue underneath each of these pieces. So I'd go all the way around and glue them in place. Then I put the hot iron on it to set the glue. That is not going to move anywhere. A lot of people ask me, why don't I use the double-sided fusible web under my appliques? I choose not to use that because I don't like the stiffness that it gives to my quilts. Because I'm quilting first, I don't want to put stiffness over the top of the quilting. The glue is perfect because using the Hobbs Heirloom double-sided fusible batting and the glue, once I wash the quilt for the first time, all the fuse in the batting washes out and all the glue washes out that I've used for the applique. So that's why I love to use those products. But what we're going to do now is we're going to put some black bias around these pieces. So I've cut some strips 1/2 inch wide on the true bias. So here we've got some strips cut. They're on the bias. But they really don't have to be on the bias because these are all straight lines. So you can cut it on the straight grain. You only need to cut on the bias when you're going to be going around curves. So we're going to fold the fabric in and in till it meets. Now I'll just get that little bit ironed down to start with. Then we're going to use the 1/4 inch sasher tool. I'm going to turn the fabric over so the fold is facing down, and I'm going to put this up and through that hole. Once I get it through that hole, I'm going to pin with a double fork pin, the twin pin that I always recommend and use when I'm doing my sashings and bias because it puts equal tension on both sides of the fabric. Hold the fabric so it stays nice and straight, and we simply push the tool with the iron. And we just keep making up all of these strips till we get enough made to go around each of those blades. So we'll cut this off. Oops, we've got a few threads there. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start putting this bias on. So we're going to start here because this little bit of bias needs to go underneath this blade. So we'll come around And we're going to use the glue. Oops, my glue just doesn't want to come out of the bottle now. There it goes. Now I've got a little bit of glue on here, so we just wipe that off. It just disappears. So some little bit of glue all the way around. Then we pop this on. Now I iron it as we go. Now when we get to the corner, we're going to do a little mitre. Now when I do that, I like to use my tailor's awl, this little awl here. We'll put some more glue coming down. So now my fingers are going to be in the road here of what you're going to be able to see. So let me just turn this on a bit of an angle so the camera can pick this up, because I want you to be able to really see how I'm going to fold this back. So I'm going to hold the awl right on the tip where the point of the blade is. I'm going to fold this bias back onto itself. So it lines up right into the corner. We will press that and we'll press all the way down. So there's our first bit of bias in place. Then I'll come around and I'll do this one next. Starting here underneath, coming around, doing your little mitre on the corner and down. Then we'll start here and do this one, here and do this one, then we come all the way around. Once we get that done, just nip off your little tails, because you don't need those tails there. Get your fussy cut flower, position that where you want it to be, glue that in place. So once you've got all of your elements on there and you're happy with your whole design, you're happy with everything, I recommend you thread your machine up with the monopoly clear thread in the bobbin and the top of the machine. Now we have a great video on our YouTube channel on how to use this properly on your machine. I recommend you watch that video so you learn how to use this thread absolutely spot on perfect, because it is brilliant thread. If I was going to use normal threads, I'd probably be changing thread colour all the time, and I don't want to do that. So when I've got my machine set up with this, I'm going to stitch right very close on both edges of the bias or of the feature strip around here. Just go all the way around. Then when I stitch the flowers on, I've done that free motion with my feed dogs down, my free motion foot on, and I've just roughly stitched around the edge. I did it a couple of times just to anchor it down beautifully. And that's how we do the whole lot of the stitching. When we want to put the butterfly on the quilt, I've used the mesh mat to cut out all my shapes for my butterfly. I'll glue the first piece down. So I'll glue this wing down first. Then when I do this wing, to give it a bit of dimension, what I do is use the glue, put some little dots of glue, just 4 dots of glue, and then kind of make yourself a little pleat. Pleat it up. And just press it with the iron to hold that in place. Then position it where you want it to be. And then we put the little body over the top, glue that in place. Now that little wing will stand up a little bit. So what I've done when I stitch the wing down, I have the monopoly thread on the machine and I'm going to free motion stitch around the shapes. Yes, it will fray a little bit, but that can look really, really good. And it's what's happened on my quilt. If we come over here to the quilt, you can see I've got the little dimension happening here. I haven't stitched this one down at all. But because all of this is kind of cut on the bias, it's not going to fray. It just sits there. But a lot of people can't live with that. A lot of people do need to stitch it down. You could do a blanket stitch by machine or by hand. There's lots of options of stitching that down. But you can see how we've put all the components in here. Got it all together beautifully. Got all the stitching done on each panel. Then we join it together. Now to join it together, there's different ways you can do it. You can do it in my back-to-back Quilt as you go technique or between the block Quilt as you go technique. I recommend you watch either one of those videos on my YouTube channel because I show you all the intricate parts of joining that together. So I would suggest you look at those and you decide which way you want to join it. But if we were going to be joining it, and I'll just take all of these pieces off because they're not all glued on there. But if we've got it all completely stitched and you want to put it together in the back-to-back technique, you're going to simply put the two pieces back to back, wrong sides to wrong sides. You will stitch down here with a seam allowance, 1/2 inch, 3/8 of an inch, whatever you like. Once you get that done, you will press the seam opened. I'll just lay this out so we can imagine what it's done. The seam would be pressed open, and then we make our sashings to go over the top. So I've used a 2.5 inch sasha here, I've used a 2 inch sasha, and then I've used the 1 inch sasha. And you've seen how I made this strip up before, it's exactly the same. So what we do is put this over the top of the seam, we'll stitch that on if you wish to, but I'll show you my quilt in a moment and I'll show you what I've done. Glue this one in place, then glue this one in place. So once you've got them all done, when I stitched my sashing on, I didn't stitch down these outside edges of this one. I just stitched the white down and the red down. So we'll just go back to the quilt and I'll just show you here what I mean. Well, actually, I didn't stitch the white down either. Haven't stitched the black down, haven't stitched the white down. All I've done is stitch the red down because these two just sit up like a little flange and just gives the quilt a little bit more dimension. So that is a very simple process. Once you get the sashing on it, you then just have to put the binding on the quilt and the quilt's done. But it's a great quilt to start as your first Quilt as you go quilt. If you've never made a Quilt as you go quilt, let me strongly recommend this be a great one for you to do. You can download the pattern on our website or you can buy it and have it shipped to you. All the other tools that we use are on our website. We have the glue, which I love, can't live without the glue. We have the monopoly thread. I do use the titanium top stitch needles because I believe, I just got sick of needles going blunt. The titanium needles stay so much sharper for so much longer than what a nickel plated needle does. The top stitch needles have a big eye, so my clear thread doesn't build up a heat friction as it runs through the needle, so it doesn't break, which is really good. I use the bowhin pencil, which is fabulous. It comes with black and white lead so you can mark any coloured fabric. And then I use the sasha tools. I've used the 1 inch, the 1 inch tool. I've used the 2 inch, the 2.5 and the 1/4 inch. You may have the complete set of 10 sashes. You'd have all of those in your toolkit. Or you may like to purchase them. And then, of course, there's the pattern and the jack scissors. So we have everything, and we also have the mesh transfer mat. Let me tell you, this has been just absolutely fantastic to me. If I could tell you the number of times I've used this mat to put an applique shape onto a piece of fabric, it's unbelievable. Wash it, iron it, doesn't hurt it. We do also have the Hobbs Heirloom double-sided fusible batting. So that's just a little bit on how we would make Dance of the Butterflies quilt. We'd love to see if you make it. We'd love to see a photo so we could share it out to all our other wonderful quilters out there to encourage them that Quilt as you go can be very, very easy once you know the technique. And it's just taking it step by step by step. Don't be frightened of quilting. Quilting can be very easy. So till we join you next time, bye for now.